In mission together we all join our hands. In mission together throughout many lands. With our hearts united, our voices we raise to God our Creator in glorious praise.
Greetings, neighbors. This is Reflections, a show sponsored by the Paducah Cooperative Ministry, highlighting the religious faith community throughout this area. My name's Gregory Waldrop, and I'm the pastor at Fountain Avenue United Methodist Church. I've been the regular co-host for this show for some years. I'm now sort of an irregular show host. I'm glad to be here with you. I'm here for several sessions we're going to share together. I'm going to be joined by my friend and sister in the faith, Nikki Dickerson. Nikki is a LPCA, a licensed
Professional Counselor Associate.
That's it. Well done. And what we are hoping to do is to explore the psychological community throughout this area and arena. What are the possibilities when you decide you need psychological counseling or help or therapy of some sort? And Nikki and I are going to try to guide the community through some of the opportunities and some of the choices. Welcome, Nikki. Glad you're here.
I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about what it means to be an LPCA.
Well, it means that I have finished my master's degree in counseling, and I'm working on my 4,000 postgraduate hours for becoming a licensed professional clinical counselor. At that point, I'll be completely autonomous and not required to have supervision or right now I'm participating in supervision that's part of an ongoing training program for the next 2 years in neurolinguistic programming. So what it means is I have all of the abilities to do therapy and to practice therapy, and I just have a supervisor that helps me along, and as part of that supervision, again, we're doing a training program. So.
Right, great. Glad to have you on board.
Glad to be
and
here.
have your guidance through all of this. It'll be an important journey through as we check out all the various options in the psychological community here. Of course, we know that the word psyche is a Bible word meaning life, and it's translated life in all sorts of ways. And the word about life is what psychologists have offered us: counseling, a perspective, a vision, and faith always has a place to play in that. I know for me, I try not to do actual psychological counseling. As a pastor, my gifts and skills are in other directions. I farm that out if there are people that come and need those particular things, and we'll talk about that a little bit, I hope, in terms of how we recommend folks along. But I try as a pastor to note to folks that come to talk with me my own biases. I tell them, particularly couples who come to me, I say, if you're coming to me for for a sort of a nice objective view of your marriage and a way to work out a divorce, you're really coming to the wrong person, because I've got a bias. I'm fiercely in favor of marriage, and I will be glad to help you work on your marriage. I'll help you understand and see the perspectives that you're operating out of. I'll help you see the faith dimensions and development stages that you're in the middle of, and give you some spiritual guidance, some spiritual direction. But I try to leave the psychology stuff for psychologists. And I think that's important. Faith plays a part in all of that, but psychology has something extra, something else to offer as well. How about you? What about your connection with faith and psychology?
Well, my faith is very important to me personally, but as far as a professional, I think it shapes how I view people when they come and talk with me. I believe wholeheartedly that people are not here by accident, that they're here, they have a purpose and a plan, and so whatever those presenting problems are, I view it in light of the fact that they have potential and purpose, and that's kind of how my faith, I feel like the way that I view people is how my faith impacts my practice. I don't advertise as a Christian counselor. I feel like that may be a little bit too narrowing. I feel like that some people may be intimidated by coming to a Christian counselor, feeling like they may be imposing their views on them or already have judgments. And so I like to hear what people's faith means to them, and in light of how their faith impacts their life, work with it with respect to what they're bringing. Those are really important resources to me. But my personal faith impacts the way that I view people in general.
Great. I know a lot of pastors did their first degree in psychology. I was one of those, at least who started that way. Religion intrigued me and stimulated me and really pushed me on more, so I ended up majoring in religion instead of psychology. But are there any current faith-based kind of therapies, anything that you think are particularly related?
I'm not sure that there's specific faith-based theories. I'm interested to learn about that myself. I actually have gone to, my bachelor's degree was from a Christian college, my master's degree was from a Christian college, and there was always faith undertones as theory was taught, but the theories themselves that I had were pretty much standard and didn't reflect faith one way or the other.
Have you worked with particular illnesses that you think come from bad faith or unhealthy faith?
I've kind of thought about this question, and I think the role that I see is sometimes people come in with the idea that God couldn't love them because of what they've done, that God can't forgive them, that God's too big to even care about their issues. I've also seen people come in with a very solid faith, and they don't understand because they have faith why they're still experiencing certain issues. And so I think I've seen some extremes, and one extreme is thinking God's completely disconnected, and the other extreme is I believe so much, I still must not believe enough though. And that definitely impacts the psychological issues that are presenting to, for counseling.
Yeah. I know my own deep sense of the things I encounter is most of the things I am confronted by have a foot in the category of grief. Loss that's unresolved. And it doesn't have to be just a death. It be all sorts of losses that just pile up and build up. And we, as a culture, don't understand the power of lament and grief and weeping and wailing, and whether it's literally or whether it's deeply. And I am confronted over and over and over by the unresolved grief that connects with people, and I think the religious community has something to say about that. And again, if it's unresolved and accumulates in all sorts of ways, it has all sorts of psychological impacts as well.
Well, I think grief is a really big part of just about, it's a big part of most of what I work with. When something traumatic happens or a death occurs, it will trigger all of the things that have created grief in the past that weren't able to be addressed or resolved. And that can come out presenting as depression. It can come out as just not having any energy, sadness. And so I think resolving grief is a huge component of finding wholeness and health and finding meaning. But it might take some time to connect with the things that really are unresolved and be able to feel like it's okay to address those.
Yeah. The other thing that I do think, in some ways it's related, but it's distinct, and that is the whole notion of forgiveness. I really do think forgiveness is a powerful, has a powerful impact in human life. I know, somebody said that if it's not careful, sometimes the psychological couch, the psychiatrist's couch, is like a confession without forgiveness, where you speak of your failures and faults, your limitations, without a word of forgiveness, without this sort of riding it by a power outside yourself.
I think that's why it's important for me to get a good picture of where a person's faith, what role that plays in their life. If you do not have a concept of God, or a God that's big enough to forgive you or loving enough to forgive you, forgiveness is going to be viewed in a particular way. I think if someone comes in and they do have a pretty strong grasp of who God is and that He can forgive, but they're just not able to completely accept that yet, it's a different type of approach, I think. And I think the idea that we can be forgiven for things that we've done in the past is a phenomenal occurrence that needs to take place in therapy. And my goal as a therapist is to kind of find ways to interweave that word of forgiveness that you were talking about with the confessing and acknowledging these are the things I've done wrong. I think that's very significant.
Well, I think all of us understand as well the sort of epidemic of depression and or bipolar, which is both the depressive side and the manic side sort of tied together. And I'm wondering your sort of ideas and notions about depression and or bipolar.
I think that the symptoms are very real that people are experiencing and talking about. I'm not sure that it's always treated in the way that is the best way, or that it's diagnosed in the most accurate way. I do believe bipolar is very real. It's a very real disorder. Depression as well. But again, it kind of come back to some of the unresolved issues, some of the things that people may be experiencing that they're just not ready to look at. I think that medication and treatment of true chemical imbalances are important. But I'm also very curious and interested in finding ways to treat unresolved issues, to treat the things that are going on inside of that person, understand what's behind those symptoms. If you can understand what's behind the symptoms, I think a lot of those symptoms can be decreased or eliminated.
Yeah.
I always, though, encourage that there's a holistic approach, that there's a doctor on board, that there's a counselor on board. Never minimize the symptoms, but as a counselor, I'm very interested in getting behind those symptoms and figuring out if we can resolve them completely.
Well, again, my own sense is that there is an epidemic, and a lot of people present themselves to me as, and it's sometimes not formally, or not even, they don't even have a grasp of what's going on, but they're lifeless and are super animated, one or the other. But some of the things religiously that I have some confidence about countering, I always ask them what their routine is, what their schedule is. And more times than not, the more depressed a person is, the more random routine is,
Right.
And part of what, and it's really a part of the Christian life for a long time, is this set kind of schedule, the same time to get up, same time to go to bed, almost the routine of the monastery. I've almost imagined that as sort of this healing process. Again, for people like that are wrestling with depression, and on those times when my own life energies are waning and diminished, I think a regular devotion time, a regular prayer time, a regular worship time is a big part of the kind of things that I think begin to help stabilize all of us, and also begin to make a difference in the body chemistry as well.
Yes.
They had a fascinating chaplain who talked in intriguing ways about the endorphins, these natural opiates of the brain chemistry, and all the things that help us to build this reservoir of endorphins, of brain chemistry that helps us through difficult times. And almost all the things they listed, again, regular routine, the chanting and repeated refrains in music, patterned lights, like stained glass, Or, by the way, the laser light shows. There's something, that are more contemporary. There's something chemical, physiological about our interaction with that. The notion of the reality of an authority in life, and that there is authority, that sort of builds up those kind of helpful mental health chemistry. And it's not that it solves it always, but it just helps your body solve it. Or for people who are taking medications and need medications, it just helps the medicines do their work even better. It builds up the kind of receptors that allows the medicine to accomplish its work better. I don't know if you had some similar sense of that.
Well, I definitely think one of the things that I'm learning in my training program with neurolinguistic programming is changing your physiology. If you you can change, we have the ability to change our emotional states. We have the ability to control what we think about, but that does take discipline, and I think that's why a routine seems to be significant, because if you have the discipline to create a routine and stick with it, then you can recognize you can have discipline in other areas. And when I meet with people, they're all in different places in their ability to do that, but that's ultimately sort of parallel to the way that I work, is that I want to help people find routine and find discipline so that they can start to recognize they can control the emotional state that they're in, while still working on addressing maybe where that sadness or that depression or that manic, where is that coming from? What's the process that's getting you to that point? And then figuring out how to change that process. So it's very parallel to what you're talking about. I think mine obviously probably has more of a psychological,
Right.
Coming from more of a psychological approach, but definitely I think that the spiritual routine is equally as important as adding in the other, eating well, exercising, all of that.
Right. And I think underlying all of that is that whole sense of community. I think psychologists talk about it in terms of systems, or family systems, or support systems. In the church,
Absolutely.
we've talked about it as covenant community, a group of people on which we can depend and count, a group of people that are gathering regularly and repeatedly. You don't have to invent the times to get up and go and pray or to worship. You don't have. It's not, every choice isn't always on the individual. It's happening in this Christian community, and there's this cluster of folks that surround you, that pay attention to you and are responsive to what's going on in your life. And I think that's sort of the other sort of.
It's kind of the nest of everything, is having that safe place where you connect. We were made to connect with people. And some people really haven't had the ability to learn how to do that in a way that's safe or healthy. And but given the opportunities, they can learn that. And I think that's our role. Your role as a leader of a church, my role as a counselor, is to help teach those who haven't had as much of a chance to experience that.
Well, what you alluded to it a little bit before, but what are your notions about medications? I know
I kind of feel like maybe I fall in the middle of the road. I think that medication is, from a psychological standpoint, at times I wonder if it is being overly prescribed. When you take certain medications, it's going to dull your senses. Sometimes that's completely healthy and appropriate. There's times that it becomes a crutch or an escape. I guess an escape more so than a crutch is, if I take these medications, then I don't have to deal with really what's going on inside of me. And I think it's just a fine line that we as professionals, or I as a professional, feel like I walk between recognizing when medication is necessary and appropriate, and when it's probably not going to be as helpful. It's, in most cases, it can be a great supplement to therapy, but I don't think that we ever envisioned that it would become being prescribed in the proportions that it is. I hate to say that medication isn't necessary. I think that it is. I don't want that message to come across, but I think that we should be very careful when we take any medication. We should know what we're taking it for, why we're taking it, what is it supposed to do, what are the side effects, and you know, can I get off of this? How is this going to impact what my goals are? I think just making making informed decisions is the important part.
Yeah, and I think that every situation has its own parameters, its own distinctive identities. I know in my experience that there are some episodes in my life and the life of others that are particularly trying and difficult, and that the hole that I'm in seems to be particularly deep, and medicine is an important helper in that. There is a reality about body chemistry that's that way, but that in time and in season that rights itself, and again through all the other ways of health that make for physical health. But there are other times when our body just doesn't do the right chemical, doesn't produce the right chemical compounds.
Right. Absolutely.
And I know of plenty of situations where medication is required lifelong, and it's just it was a very amazing kind of a moment when I realized that mental health, mental chemistry is no different than heart chemistry or kidney chemistry or anything else, or hormonal difficulties. That it's a physiological event, and it's all the good conversation in the world is not going to remedy the chemical imbalance. And I think I've been very aware of all the times and situations when it was a reality, and it did turn into a lifelong connection with.
And I think there's in the world of mental health disorders, there's sort of a continuum, and the classification of serious mental illness is typically where medications are absolutely necessary. And if you think of someone who has schizophrenia, for example, medication is absolutely necessary for them to be able to keep their symptoms to a point where they can function. I think one of the things as you were talking that I was thinking about is, in most cases, medication is a lot like if you have high cholesterol or high blood pressure, a doctor can prescribe you a medication, but if you don't do all the other parts that are necessary, the medication is going to continue to need to be increased, and eventually it may not work because you're not taking care of the other areas, exercising, eating healthy, those kinds of things. With psychotropic medications, I think in a lot of cases it's the same. If you take those medicines but you don't have good therapy and good other areas of your life that are healthy, then that medication is most likely not going to have the full effectiveness. And so I encourage people to be very informed, educate themselves about those medications, the side effects, and really understand and be their own advocate. And then the second part is to begin to build in those healthy routines and healthy responses to that place that they're in. And ideally, it can all work very nicely. But again, it's kind of like someone who has high cholesterol. If they keep eating fried chicken, well, it's probably going to need to continue to be increased. So,
Great. I know there are counselors, and particularly counselors that are associated with churches across the region, and others that are freestanding, but also have a deep abiding faith in what's going on. Almost all of them are that I know of have fees. What are the sort of fee possibilities, and maybe even more specifically, somebody came to you, what would your fees be?
I've talked to several people. I've heard the average fee is somewhere around $90, $95. I think a lot of it depends on whether that counselor uses sliding fee scales, whether they bill insurances. For me, I picked the middle of the road and picked $60. There are some things I can do to discount fees, and so it's not just $60, that's it. It's not a sliding fee scale, but there are some discount possibilities. as far as other counselors in the area, I can only go based on
Yeah,
a couple
sure.
of conversations, and I think the important thing is to figure out what a person can afford, what's realistic, and then interview the counselor. Ask them everything that.
Right. You're not just have to take whatever's there. You can in fact
Right.
interview and pick and choose and.
Right, and I think that's important because we're not a one-size-fits-all people. You know, just like there's pastors that may fit some people better, there's doctors that fit some people better, there's counselors that we all have different approaches more than likely, or we have some variation of the same approach. And so it's important to be your own advocate and be educated and kind of try on a few things. See if, you know, when you talk to the counselor, what's your response? How do you feel inside? Does it feel like that person made a good connection with you, or did you feel kind of, don't know if I like that or not? But it's definitely okay to call them and interview them. They're going to be taking a significant part in your life, and so it's important that you have a good connection.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Any last minute kind of things you think we ought to know as we set up and begin this this series of programs about psychological community and the resources that are around this community?
I'm excited. I think it's significant to me to be able to promote this profession and be able to show that we all have different experiences and backgrounds, and Paducah has some really wonderful counselors, and so I'm looking forward to being able to do this with you, and it feels like I've come back home since I've left PCM, so I'm glad to be here.
That's great. I'm glad you're here as well, and I'm glad for this opportunity. I think we are important related professions.
Mm-hmm.
And we have at heart the same goal, the good health, the strong health of all the folks with whom we come in contact with. And I'm confident that our encounters and conversations, interviews will bring a lot of perspectives to life and faith.
Mm-hmm.
So we hope you will continue with us on this journey, and for the next few programs, we'll be again interviewing psychologists and counselors across the region. Maybe you have someone you'd like to recommend that we interview, or that you've had particularly good times with and good encounters with. Please contact us at Paducah, #2.org, and let us know your response to this program and to the programs that we're going to share, and also with any counselors that have been of particular benefit to you. We are glad you've been with us this hour for Reflections. We're the show sponsored by the Paducah Cooperative Ministry, where we, all of us together, do God's work with human hands. We'll see you the next time. Shalom.
In mission to